Oh, hello. Today I would like to talk about what were my 50 favorite movies of 2025. I think I saw about 110 movies last year, which might be a personal best for me. That's new movies. Last year I saw about I think 85, so we're doing good. And I actually think that number might be a little low. I think there were a couple I forgot to put on my list. But those wouldn't be super high ranking ones, so we don't really have to worry about that. Um, so, I could just start at the bottom of the list and go to the top, but number one, that would take a million years, and number two, we would have to be like really negative for like 20 movies, and I just feel like celebrating the ones I really liked, so we're going to do that. And we're going to start with some runner ups. These were the ones that were kind of, like in the 60s, like almost made the list, but couldn't quite get on there. And those include The Naked Gun, Jay Kelly, Eternity, The Shrouds, The Toxic Avenger, Sentimental Value, Lurker, Bone Lake, Fantastic Four, and Roofman. And then, even though I saw somewhere between 110 and 115 new movies last year, there were still plenty of things that I was interested in that I just didn't get a chance to watch. So I would like to formally apologize to The Gorge, Riff Raff, The Actor, Magazine Dreams, Predator, Killer of Killers, Materialists, F1, Nobody 2, Eden, Relay, Splitsville, Kiss of the Spider Woman, The History of Sound, Good Fortune, Hedda, Nuremberg, Christie, Peter Hujar's Day, Arco, Wicked for Good, Sisu, Road to Revenge, Zootopia 2, The Chronology of Water, Rosemead, It Ends, Ella McKay, Dust Bunny, The Housemaid, Is This Thing On, and The Testament of Anne Lee. So, if there's a movie you feel should be on this list and it's not on my list of runner-ups, it's not on my list of movies I didn't see, then at that point I just probably didn't enjoy it as much as you. And I'm sorry about that, but we'll get through it together. Let's start with number 50, which is The Smashing Machine. Um, I feel like a lot of people were really underwhelmed by this movie, and I understand why. I think there are elements of it that are kind of purposefully underwhelming because it doesn't follow that kind of that feel good inspirational structure of like a typical Hollywood sports movie. But I feel like the reasons it underwhelmed a lot of people is weirdly why I liked it so much and what I really admired about it, because it's very low key, very realistic, just a portrait of this guy, who gets beat up for a living, and he has this marriage that's not going so well, and he's just trying to stay happy and to some degree and stay competitive and trying to be a good guy, and it's like a very human story, and it's not like full of like big fireworks, like they didn't heighten anything, you know and so when it ends you're kind of like, that's it. But then you think about, well, that's probably how he felt too, and that's kind of neat. And I will say, I think The Rock is legitimately great in this, and I feel weird saying that, but I remember like halfway through the year we were all talking about like, oh yeah, The Rock is totally going to win an Oscar for this. And honestly, I think maybe The Rock should have won an Oscar for this. I don't know. He should have at least gotten nominated, because to me, like I've heard some people say they watched this and they just saw The Rock the whole time and it messed it up for them. For me, he kind of really disappeared into the sky, because once again he's not doing anything big with it. It's not like a big Oscar-y performance. It's very subtle, and the makeup they did on him is functional without being too showy and elaborate, and the way he changes his voice, the way he changes his physicality. After a while I did legitimately forget I was watching The Rock. So it's not gonna blow you away, and Benny Safdie's movie compared to Josh Safdie's movie last year, which we're going to get to later, it does kind of maybe suffer in comparison, I think. But regardless, I think it's a cool film, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Benny Safdie does next. Because what's interesting, is the Safdie brothers have that very individualistic style, and we saw that much more in Josh's movie than in Benny's movie. So in a way, that excites me because Benny going forward is going to be kind of a little more unpredictable. I don't really know what I'm going to get from him next time, and I'm looking forward to finding out. Number 49 is Elio. People really love to shit on Pixar these days, and I will acknowledge they're not at the height of their powers, but I think they've made some really good movies lately. I really liked Luca. I really liked Turning Red. And Elio, I thought was great. I really like the friendship between the kid and his weird blob friend, and it's beautiful animation as Pixar typically is. And I just feel like, it's not like an emotional powerhouse. We're not talking like Inside Out levels of emotion here, but it's just a really nice movie about a really nice friendship and, hanging out with aliens. That's fun. Number 48 is Warfare. Which is kind of the opposite of that movie, in that it's not a lot of fun, really. It's pretty unpleasant, but in a very effective way. Um, so this was co-directed by one of the people who was actually, whose story the film is representing. So that allowed it to have this great degree of authenticity, and it really does put you in a time and place and almost like doesn't allow you to leave. They're like, you're gonna experience, every second of this. And there's one of these guys who he gets hurt, a little ways into the movie, and then he basically has to like scream for an hour, and he fucking commits to it, and that's kind of the whole movie. It's just everybody committing super hard to just realistically recreating a couple of hours in the lives of these soldiers. And, it's not a film I'm going to be returning to a lot just because it's kind of a harrowing watch, but it is a beautifully done movie. Number 47 is Pavements, this really cool documentary about Pavement covering their recent reunion tour. And also, simultaneously, it has all these storylines going at once. Like it's them on their tour, and then it's these other people who are putting together like a pavement ballet, and kind of like a dance show based around their songs. And then there's like a fake biopic being made about Pavement too, which is a complete joke. They were never actually making a biopic, but it's kind of making fun of biopics and method acting. And Joe Keery is playing Stephen Malkmus, and he becomes obsessed with Stephen Malkmus, and he can't get out of Stephen Malkmus's head. And then when he acts like Stephen Malkmus, he doesn't even really seem like Stephen Malkmus. It's really funny. Um, and if you're a Pavement fan, it has a lot of great music in it, and it's just it's a good time. It's very inventive. I like it. All right, number 46 is The Life of Chuck. Um, and when I was hearing about this movie on the film festival circuit, I was like, okay, that's probably going to be like a top 10 movie for me, and it wasn't, but I still really liked it. I mean, you can see some of these reviews on the poster, like a masterpiece, truly profound and magical, the best Stephen King movie ever made, one of the most profoundly beautiful films ever made. I heard a lot of things like that, and like the hype was crazy. And then after a while, I mean, you saw during this recent award season, this film was not recognized very often. And if this was really one of the most profoundly beautiful films ever made, you would hope it would get a little more attention in that area. But it feels like after a little bit of time, everybody came to their senses, and instead of it being like this transcendent masterwork, everybody just agreed, like, yeah, that's a good movie. And it is. It's a very good movie. Um, I do think that it gets less interesting as it goes on. That's maybe the main problem with it, is it starts in this place that's really, really compelling. And if that was the whole movie, I think I would have really loved it. But then it goes into the second act with Tom Hiddleston. It's basically like a lot of it is an extended dance sequence, and that's cool too. But what's intriguing about it is you're trying to connect this part to the first part and to be like, how do these go together? Because the movie goes backwards in time. So the second part is happening after the third part. And in the third part, all of these really compelling things were happening. Like we kept seeing these advertisements up everywhere for Chuck saying that Chuck was retiring, and we see, the stars, go out in the sky, and just replaced by darkness, and it's like it's crazy compelling. And then the more you understand about what's going on, kind of the less interesting it becomes, I think. But it's a very good movie. It has a really good ensemble cast. It's really well shot, really well written. It's just, not one of the most profoundly beautiful films ever made. And it's not, in my opinion, the best Stephen King movie ever made. I mean, I think, you still got Stand By Me and Misery and The Shawshank Redemption, and I think those are probably better. All right, number 45 is Blue Moon, one of two films directed last year by Richard Linklater. Will the other one be on this list? Perhaps. But Blue Moon is just a really solid movie about Lorenz Hart, kind of a classic American songbook songwriter. Wrote a lot of really wonderful music, in the kind of the musical theater space. And his partner, Richard Rodgers, is writing with this new guy, Hammerstein. And Rodgers and Hammerstein is definitely the more famous duo to, Rodgers and Hart. So it's just basically about Lorenz coming to terms with where he is in his career and where he is with his life, and that he's been deceiving himself about certain things, about the reality of his situation. And it's a very depressing movie, honestly, but it's very effectively done. Ethan Hawke is fantastic in it. It's like one of his best performances ever. And this scene here on the poster, this scene between Ethan Hawke and Margaret Qualley, is just like heartbreaking. It just goes like on and on and on, and it just keeps getting worse and worse for him, and it made me feel so bad for him, and it's a beautifully written movie too. I was happy to see it get an Oscar nomination for writing, and I think it definitely deserved to. And yeah, I mean, even if you're not really all that interested in the subject matter, because I can't say I was like itching for a Lorenz Hart biopic, give it a try. It's a very good movie. Number 44 is Companion. This is a really fun, kind of horror movie, but I would say it's less focused on the horror and more just on being very entertaining and surprising and predictable. I don't know if anybody found it scary, really, but that's fine because it's a really good time with a really great lead performance by this actress whose name I cannot fucking remember. She's on Yellow Jackets. You know who she is. She is great, and I feel like this movie's impact might have been dulled by the fact that it had this initial trailer that was very mysterious and compelling, and then the second trailer they told you exactly what was going on. So you go into the movie knowing certain things about this character, the nature of this character that I wish I could have kind of organically learned. But regardless, I'm not going to let that ruin the movie for me. It's still a super entertaining film, and goes to its credit, even knowing what I knew going in, it goes to a lot of places that I didn't expect, and I'm very excited to see what Drew Hancock does next. Number 43 is The Phoenician Scheme. Um, the new film by Wes Anderson. Great ensemble cast, as his films always have. Beautifully shot, beautifully composed. And it's even when a Wes Anderson movie isn't like exceptional, like even when it isn't one of his best, it's still like one of the most enjoyable times you can have at the movies. I just find his work, really relaxing and comforting, and this is just an enjoyable watch. I thought his film before this, um God, what was it called? What the fuck was it called? Hang on. Hang on. I cut before when I couldn't remember something about something. Oh, Asteroid City. Fuck. Fuck. Yeah, Asteroid City. Asteroid City was something kind of different for Wes Anderson. I thought it was, like atypically kind of emotional and revealing, and this kind of isn't that. This is just, him making a fun, goofy movie. Um, and, there's nothing wrong with that. I had a good time. Number 42 is Mickey 17, the new film from Bong Joon Ho. Bong Joon Ho is interesting because it feels like, when he does movies in English, he's done three now. He's done um Snowpiercer. I don't know what's going on with my brain. He's done Snowpiercer, Okja, and this, and it feels like his English language movies are kind of a lot broader than his South Korean movies, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, this is, I think, a super entertaining movie. Robert Pattinson is great in it. I mean, there are like 50 Robert Pattinsons in it, and they're all really good. And yeah, the script is very fun. There's some good political commentary in there that really hit home. And overall, it's not like masterpiece level Bong Joon Ho, like Memories of Murder or Parasite or Mother, but it is a very very entertaining film, like his other American films, and I think it's definitely worth a watch. Which I'm only mentioning because it like absolutely bombed at the box office, which is a bummer. More people should see it. All right, number 41 is The Monkey. So, the second and I believe final Stephen King adaptation on this list. And this is a new film by Osgood Perkins, who recently gave us Longlegs, which I absolutely loved. And The Monkey is definitely the broadest, most insane, bloodiest movie he's made so far. It's a lot more focused on comedy than his stuff usually is, and it's a lot of fun. It just is. Like some of the gore in this is just so over the top and insane, and it's just these kind of Rube Goldberg style deaths. Those kind of deaths you might see in like a Final Destination movie. They do that here just beautifully. Um, Now, Osgood Perkins came out with another movie last year called Keeper, and I really didn't like Keeper very much. You're not going to see that on this list, but The Monkey, I think, it didn't reach the heights of Longlegs for me, but I do think this is, just in terms of pure entertainment value, this is the most entertaining movie he's ever made, and I would love to see him continue in this vein. He can do, weird, slow moving, artsy horror movies, and he can do goofy, crazy, blood soaked bullshit like this. And, I'm totally down for both. Number 40 is another kind of insane horror movie, The Rule of Jenny Penn. And this is basically John Lithgow terrorizing Jeffrey Rush in a retirement home, and it's just pretty batshit crazy, like hard to watch at times, but super entertaining. John Lithgow, is always great when he's allowed to like play a villain and really sink his teeth into it, and he's fantastic here. And yeah, I mean, this is just it's just a really fun movie, and you do really feel bad for Jeffrey Rush. It had been like years since I saw him in a movie, and I missed him. Jeffrey Rush, underrated actor, good actor. Uh, Number 39 is Good Boy. This is a horror film starring a dog, and kind of from the dog's point of view, as his owner is going through this kind of crisis, and the dog has to figure out, what's going on and how do I deal with this, and it's just beautifully done, because dogs don't really know what's happening. I mean, they know what's happening in the moment. They can, they have emotions about things, but it's not like you can explain to the dog, like, okay, in this part of the story, you have to feel this way because this happened, and then this is about to happen, so we need to, to transition, because so your emotion, You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? And that's usually fine for when, there's like a dog that's like a minor character. But for this, where the dog is the star and, it's kind of all riding on the performance of the dog, that's like a risky proposition. And they really pulled it off here. The dog does a hell of a job. Indy is his name. And after the movie, they had a little featurette where they showed how painstaking it was to make this movie and how they would kind of elicit different emotions out of the dog, and all of this. And it was just very impressive to me. It's a short movie, and it's a fun watch, and it is uniquely stressful because, as much as you don't want to see bad things happen to a human protagonist, you especially don't want anything bad to happen to this dog. Like if the dog gets hurt, I'm gonna feel miserable. So it does it kind of raises the stakes a little bit. It's a fun movie. Number 38 is Mega Doc. This is a documentary by Mike Figgis, who most widely known for Leaving Las Vegas. That was his, big breakout movie. And but he hasn't like made a lot of films in recent years. Certainly not a lot of narrative films. Just kind of more in the documentary space. And this is a documentary about the making of Megalopolis, which was my least favorite movie of last year. I thought it was a complete train wreck. And I was very curious to watch this film because, I thought maybe it would explain why. It would explain what happened. And it very much does. Like, I came out of this thing knowing exactly why and how that movie went so colossally wrong. And you also get the sense that Francis Ford Coppola just does not give a fuck. Like he has this vision and he wants to do it and he's willing to put in millions and millions of dollars of his own money to make it happen. And all he cares about is, number one, seeing his vision on the screen, and number two, everybody having fun and having a nice time. And they're always, playing these games and stuff, playing games with the actors and trying to keep everybody entertained and keep everybody's spirits high while he's making this insane, crazy bullshit movie. And, it's kind of weirdly inspirational in a way because you saw how much he threw himself into this insane idea and how much he put behind it to back it up, and the fact that we know it has a sad ending and the movie turned out to be really bad is, it doesn't really take away from it because it's very clear that the movie we saw is 100% the movie he wanted to make. So he loves it, you know? Yeah, and the fact that he strived for decades to make this film and he was able to accomplish it exactly as he wanted on his own terms. That's great. That's great. I mean, every artist should be allowed that opportunity. I know that's not realistic from a funding perspective, but it's nice to see, and it's it's pretty entertaining too. All right, number 37 is Sorry Baby, which is written, directed, and starring Ava Victor. And she's, I wasn't familiar with her before this. I don't think she's done a lot of films, but she's great. She's great in all three of those roles. Her protagonist is, like really compelling. You really empathize with her and relate to her. And the dialogue between her, especially between her and her best friend, played by Naomi Ackie, and also the scenes with her kind of like quasi boyfriend kind of guy, played by God damn it, played by the guy from Manchester by the Sea. Oh my God. Okay. Well, the son from Lucas Hedges. Jesus Christ. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was great dialogue, really strong performances. Great cat, A+ cat. And just there are times in this that are just really fun and light and enjoyable, and there are times in this where it gets really heavy and it makes you feel pretty bad. But it all comes together into just this portrait of this woman, and why her brain works the way it does, and what she's been through, and what she wants out of life. And it's a nice movie. I like it. Number 36 is The Plague. This is just a movie about how shitty little kids can be to each other. It's basically, I think they're like middle schoolers. It's just basically, this like swim team, and they've basically ostracized one of the kids because he has this weird like skin rash, which they call the plague. And they're like, if you hang around this kid too long, you're gonna get the plague too. And it is a literal thing. It's this rash, but it's also a metaphor because this kid is like really weird and really nerdy and socially awkward. And so it's kind of a metaphor too for, if you want to be a cool kid, if you want everybody to like you, you're going to stay over here. And if you want nobody to like you except for this one weird guy, you can go over here and talk to that guy. And it really takes you back to how absolutely vicious, kids of that age could be, and just in social terms, just even with their friends, often shitty, let alone people we didn't like, so it's just a really effective movie that really gets under your skin. The music in it is really interesting. It's scored very much like a horror film, but it's really just about kids being jerks to each other, and it all comes together into something that is reasonably devastating. It's good. I like it. Uh, Number 35 is If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, and this is maybe the most stressful movie I watched last year, to the point where it wasn't a super fun watch, but I did admire a lot of things about it. I thought it was very well written, very well directed by Mary Bronstein. Rose Byrne is fantastic in it. I think she deserved all the accolades she got. And the supporting cast is really interesting. You have ASAP Rocky playing a friend of hers, and his character is really likable. And then you have Conan O'Brien playing her psychiatrist, and it might seem like stunt casting on the surface, and like maybe it is to an extent, but he gives like an actually really good performance in the movie. He really invests in the character and like develops a physicality, and it just it doesn't seem like him. It's very divorced from the way he'd typically act and present himself, and I thought he was good. I think he's a legitimately good actor. I mean, he obviously tried very hard for this because this is like a serious role, and he didn't want to screw up the movie. But he did it. He did a good job. And this movie is just It's not fun. It's hard. It's like kind of painful. But I think it is worth watching at least once, and then probably never again. Number 34 is The Secret Agent, and this is a movie that's kind of gone up my list the more time I've spent away from it. And it might even go higher, as the years go on. I went into this movie, taking the title at face value and expecting it to kind of be like this big espionage film, and it's really not. Like the guy who Wagner Moura plays is not a secret agent. It's called that for other reasons, and it's about a guy who has to kind of live like a secret agent, who has to hide his identity, who always has to be looking over his shoulder when he goes out, and you eventually learn the reasons why, and they're so petty and ridiculous, that but the stakes are so real that you just really feel for this guy. There's also this great tangent about some legs that they find inside a shark, and the public kind of runs away with this in their imagination, and there are like movies and cartoons and shit made about the legs, and it's delightful. I almost feel like you know it's at an awkward length because it's very long, it's pretty demanding. I think, they could have gone one way and trimmed some of these side stories a bit, and, made it a more accessible movie. But I kind of wish they'd gone the other way with it and, like, made it into, like, a mini series and, given it, like, another 3 hours, to kind of dig into these side characters even a little more, But, what we get is a really interesting movie that maybe it's not ideal for casual watching, but it's neat. This is good commentary. I'm doing a good job. It's a neat movie. Wagner Moore is really good in it. Number 33 is Presence. This is one of two movies that Steven Soderbergh made last year. The other was Black Bag, and Black Bag is not going to be on this list. It's not a bad movie. I didn't love it. I was a little bored. I was not bored by Presence. I found this to be like a very emotionally gripping movie, and it is kind of based around this gimmick that is shot from the point of view of a ghost, essentially a ghost, and he kind of just drifts through the house unobserved by this family, and you watch the family from this perspective, and the whole time you're wondering, why is this ghost here, why is this ghost haunting this house, why is this ghost so interested in this family, and the story that emerges is pretty tragic, but it's always compelling, and just what could have been kind of a boring gimmick, it really just elevates the material and gives you a kind of haunting film that you've really never seen before. So I think it is one of his more inventive films, certainly in the last few years. Number 32 is Opus. This movie got kind of bad reviews. I mean, I don't know if bad, but certainly mixed, very mixed. And I don't know why. I found this movie just super entertaining. It's about this group of people who go to this kind of Paisley Park style estate to hang out with this, crazy pop songwriter genius man played by John Malkovich, who is just incredibly entertaining in this film. And yeah, I mean, I don't. This is kind of similar to Companion, where if they're trying to scare you, they're not doing a great job, but if they're trying to shock you and entertain you and surprise you, in that way they're succeeding with flying colors. It's I don't know why this movie was so divisive. I had a real good time with it. Give it a try. Hey, it's tomorrow now. Number 31. It was just an accident. This is a really fascinating movie. Surprisingly funny at times. Really good ensemble cast. And it's, a very complex film in, what it's trying to say and how it goes about saying it and the morality of these characters and their situation. And I feel like, a lot of people when they watch this are going to have different reactions to the things they see in the film and, what's morally justified, what isn't. And, it's definitely an interesting discussion piece. But more than that, it's a really cool piece of filmmaking. My favorite part of this movie is actually the very beginning, right? Because you start with this one guy and his family in the car, and their car breaks down, and they go to this, repair shop, and you have no reason not to think this won't be the main character. So you're thinking, okay, maybe this guy is going to go to the repair shop, something bad is going to happen there, like they're going to try to rob him or something, and it's going to escalate from there. But then we start following one of the guys who works at the repair shop, and he starts doing this really complicated series of events. And it creates this really fascinating dichotomy because it's like you're watching him do all these steps that are very purposeful and very deliberate, but you have no idea why he's doing it. And it's so interesting to see somebody carrying out this, complex plan without even knowing what the end result is supposed to be, what his motivations are. Is this the protagonist or the antagonist? Like, what is going on? And I've never quite experienced something like that in a film. And when you do learn what's going on and what the motivations of these people are, the movie just gets more fascinating from there. So yeah, I mean it's a wonderful movie. I'm sorry that Jafar Panahi had to get kicked out of his home country to make it, but it is a great film. Number 30 is The Ugly Stepsister. I wasn't expecting much from this movie. I'd heard it was kind of like a body horror take on Cinderella, and that it was pretty gross. And I saw it, streaming on Hulu, so I was like, yeah, give it a try. And I was surprisingly invested in this movie. I think it's a really interesting spin on the Cinderella story, to the point where there's a surprising turn about halfway through it that maybe some people when they watch this they do see it coming and it's not even a twist for them, but it was for me, and it kind of recontextualizes the whole movie. Um, but yeah, I mean, what you do get here, is a lot of gross body horror stuff. I mean, that was an accurate way to describe the film, but it's not, you know, really, you know, cartoonish and out there in the way that like The Substance was, for example. Like the the things the characters go through in this movie are painful. Like they make you wince, and it's just, it has a great score, co-written by Kata, who's this like experimental jazz man who I don't know much about, but as an introduction to his music, I was definitely intrigued. And yeah, surprisingly involving, compelling movie with some of the grossest visuals you're gonna see in any movie from last year. Number 29 is The Surfer. I thought this was a really interesting film, Australian movie starring Nicolas Cage as this guy who, shows up on this beach and he's supposed to be buying a house nearby. It's a house that he grew up in, and he's trying to reclaim this property because he has kind of this utopic ideal of what his life used to be, and now his life and his family are in disrepair, and he wants to get back to that. And so, anyway, he comes to this kind of this beach, that after a while you start to think maybe there's something supernatural going on here, because once he gets to the beach, he never leaves the beach again for the rest of the film, and things keep escalating and getting crazier. The editing in this is really cool. The way it just plays with your mind, plays with your perception of events, and makes you question what's real, what's not real, what's even going on. You know, is just really interesting, and Nicolas Cage kills it as he typically does. It's a fun movie. Number 28 is Sovereign. This went straight to streaming, and I don't really know why. I think it's a very intelligently written movie, a very interesting movie, a movie where, all of the characters are deeply, deeply flawed. And you can see how all of them got that way. It doesn't offer like easy answers. Yeah. I do think this is maybe the best performance I've ever seen Nick Offerman give, at least in a movie, because it's kind of hard to beat his Last of Us episode. But yeah, film wise, I mean, his character is really interesting. He's basically, if you've heard of this, these people who consider themselves sovereign citizens, which basically means they are not applicable to the laws of the United States, or to any government, really. Um, and so Nick Offerman is trying to live this way, and he's trying to convince his son to live this way. Meanwhile, because he acts like the law doesn't apply to him, he's constantly facing resistance. It's like his house is about to be foreclosed on, and the police are after him and all of this, and it's just it's really interesting to see the wheels turning in his mind and see him trying to justify this and trying to be the victim in this situation where he's clearly the antagonist. And his son, played by Jacob Tremblay, you get to see him, the process of him being indoctrinated, and then him getting a little distance from his dad and starting to question some of this stuff. It's a very interesting movie, very tense. Number 27 is Caught Stealing. Now, Darren Aronofsky has a rare distinction of being one of my favorite directors and being one of my least favorite directors, depending on the project. Like, a lot of his stuff, like, I love Requiem for a Dream, I love Black Swan, I love The Wrestler. Those are incredible movies. But then when he misses and he does something like, Noah or Mother, or especially The Fountain, which is like one of my least favorite movies ever, he misses pretty hard. And I think this is his best movie in quite a long time. And this is one of his most accessible movies, probably his most accessible film since The Wrestler. It's not trying to, like, wow you with artistry. It's just telling this really fun, kind of pulpy crime story with a great cast and a really sharp script and a fantastic cat. Super, super, super good cat actor. And yeah, Austin Butler, is a really, really dependable lead. He does a great job. There are some moments in here that you really don't see coming that are very surprising. And yeah, it's a real fun movie. Number 26 is Thunderbolts. This is my favorite Marvel movie in quite a while. And, if you'd asked me at the beginning of the year, which am I going to prefer, Thunderbolts or Fantastic Four, I would be like, Fantastic Four, obviously. Are you insane? But no, not that Fantastic Four was a bad movie. I really enjoyed it, but this affected me much more. I mean, it's a really funny film, but it also has genuine emotional content to it. It does make you feel for its characters, especially Yelena, played by Florence Pugh, and she always does a great job. And her weird father-daughter dynamic with Red Guardian, played by David Harbour. And also, the villain in this movie is really, really interesting. He's a very empathetic villain, and his whole psychology really drives a lot of the movie. and like his struggle is a very personal, very internal struggle that he externalizes and fucks a lot of shit up just because he has to come to terms with some things inside of himself that he can't quite come to terms with. So I'm trying to be vague because spoilers, but it's a really endearing, really fun movie with a surprisingly high amount of emotional content to it as well. Number 25 is Together. This is another kind of body horror kind of thing about this couple played by Alison Brie and Dave Franco, who are, a couple in real life, so they can act real well as a couple. And they basically, you know, they find it increasingly difficult to be apart from each other, to the point where, at first it's just, they'll get like physical symptoms, but then eventually their bodies start like fusing together, you know? And so most of the film is them trying to figure out, why is this happening to us? Can we stop it? And I would say, the question is more interesting than what the answer turns out to be, but it's still very entertaining once you start getting the answers, but it's almost like more compelling when it's kind of more ephemeral and you have to guess at more stuff. But yeah, I mean, overall it's just a really fun, really well acted movie with a really cool concept, and I'm looking forward to seeing what this filmmaker does next. Number 24 is Sarat. This list was supposed to come out last weekend, but I delayed it because I finally got a chance to see Sarat. And I'm glad I did, because, it's not like in my top 10 or something, but it made it to number 24 out of 110 movies, That's pretty good. And that being said, I may never watch this again because it is like a uniquely upsetting movie. Like, this movie has like one of the, maybe the most shocking moment I've seen in a movie in a long time. Like, you really do not see it coming, and when it comes, you have this state of disbelief. You're like, did they really just do that? And then from there, it doesn't let up. Things just keep getting worse and worse and worse. Basically, it's about this father who's trying to reconnect with his daughter. And so him and his son, they go out into the desert and they're trying to find her at a rave where they think she might be. And she's not there. But these people who are there tell them that there's going to be another rave a little farther down the road, and the dad is like, okay, I'm going to follow you guys to this other rave, and then maybe my daughter will be there. And things just get so horrible that after a while it becomes clear that, like, what is the end game here? What does anybody want to accomplish after all this horrible stuff? Even if he finds his daughter, what's he gonna say to her? Are these people still, gonna get to some rave and dance around after all this horrible shit they've endured? And it's unrelenting. It's a beautifully shot movie. The score is really cool. Um, on one hand, I think the ending is a little disappointing just because it's so open ended. But on the other hand, like I said, after all this stuff they go through, I can't think of another way to end the movie. It's like, it's not satisfying, but it's not supposed to be satisfying, you want everything to be okay, in his family, but after a while things get broken to the point where they're not going to be able to be repaired, and so it's a very depressing, very heavy movie, but I do think it is worth watching at least once. Number 23 is Wake Up Dead Man, the new film in the Knives Out series from Rian Johnson. And this basically, what's great about this movie is what's great about the other two as well. The script is super sharp. It's a really well crafted mystery. The ensemble cast is fantastic. Um, Daniel Craig is kind of like, even in the first one, where things kind of revolved around Ana de Armas's character. Benoit Blanc, played by Daniel Craig, was still kind of the lead of the movie. But that's not really the case with this one. He's kind of a secondary character to Josh O'Connor, who plays, this priest who has recently moved to this new parish, and the pastor there is like just a giant asshole, played by Josh Brolin. He does a great job, and Josh Brolin ends up dead, and so um, Josh O'Connor has to, figure out what's going on. And Benoit Blanc just like happens to show up, and they go through this really fun puzzle together with all these really entertaining characters and just really unexpected twists and turns. I didn't see any of this coming, and I didn't in the other ones too. And I think that's just a construction thing that Rian Johnson has really studied, like classic, mystery writers, especially Agatha Christie, and he's learned a lot of very important lessons from them about how to deceive the audience. So yeah, if you like whodunits, you should have already seen the other two movies, Knives Out and Glass Onion. So watch this too; it's just as good. Number 22 is The Long Walk. Until I saw Seurat, this might have been like the bleakest movie I saw last year. I think I said that one movie previous was the last Stephen King adaptation on this list. That's not true. This is the third one. I'm pretty sure this is the last one. But yeah, it was a good year for Stephen King movies. Yeah, but The Long Walk, if you don't know, is basically just, it's set in this dystopian future, where poverty is like very rampant, and all of these kids are basically walking until they can't walk anymore, and the last one that's up on their feet will get a wish fulfilled by the government. And so all these kids start out with like optimism and confidence, like they're going to win this thing. And you're just watching these people get broken down, like physically, emotionally, over the course of the film. And it's like very draining. And at the end, much like Seurat, you're like, there isn't going to be a happy ending here. It's just a question of how sad is it going to be, And the answer is very sad. Uh, but really, really well acted movie, really well written movie, very depressing. Speaking of very depressing, number 21 is Are We Good? This is a documentary about the stand up comedian Marc Maron after the death of his partner, the filmmaker Lynn Shelton. And it's basically just about him processing her very sudden death, and trying to figure out not only how to go on emotionally and how to deal with his grief, but also like how can I be a comedian at this point. It's like, do I have to fundamentally change, even what I do, what I'm identified as? And Patton Oswalt, went through a similar thing when his wife passed, where he wondered if, he felt bad even getting on a stage and telling jokes, in light of what had happened, the enormity of it. But yeah, it's about Mark just figuring out these vital questions in his own life and just, raising a bunch of cats. And it's a very likable movie. I mean, I think some people, if you think Marc Maron is like an annoying asshole, which I understand why you would. He's a curmudgeon. So if you don't like him, you won't really like the film, I don't think. But I've been a fan of Mark for a while. The abrasiveness of what he does can be a little hard to get through at first, but then once you learn kind of more about him and what his kind of inner emotional life is like, I've just come to really respect him as a comedian and as an actor and as an interviewer. So Yeah, I think it's a very powerful movie. Number 20 is Begonia. This is the latest movie from Yorgos Lanthimos. And, I love Yorgos' stuff. Like, when he's firing on all cylinders, like with The Lobster or The Favorite or Poor Things, he's going to give you one of the best movies of the year. And even when, he's like, slightly um maybe his peak level on something like Kinds of Kindness, you still get a very entertaining and involving movie. And this, I think, is one of his most purely entertaining films, despite containing a lot of stuff that's like very uncomfortable, occasionally very hard to watch. It's about this woman getting kidnapped and getting chained up in this guy's basement because he's convinced that she's an alien. So, obviously that's a pretty emotionally fraught situation. But they do get a lot of comedy out of this kind of horrifying premise. And the ending, I'm not going to say much about the ending, but, I am going to say I recognize why where this movie goes would be divisive, but I loved it. Like, I think, if I wrote this film, that's exactly the way I would have wanted it to end. So I was happy with that. Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons are both, like, fantastic in this movie. The script is super sharp. I know this is a remake, I believe, of a Korean movie, and I haven't seen that original film. I would very much like to, but in the meantime, this is wonderful. Ah, spoilers. Number 19 is Nouvelle Vague. This is the second film by Richard Linklater of 2025. So yeah, they both made it on the list, and you know. I wouldn't have expected that I would like Nouvelle Vague more than Blue Moon, considering, it's a movie about Jean Luc Godard and the making of Breathless. And I've never been really a Godard fan. Um, I've always found him kind of annoying as an artist, kind of pretentious. And what's great about this movie is he is kind of annoying and kind of pretentious in the movie, and it's not like this loving portrait of, like, oh, this guy was the world's biggest genius. He was a guy who was, very inventive, who had a lot of ideas that went against the grain with film. But, everybody around him, when they're making this movie, think that he's nuts and that he's being irresponsible and he's driving everybody insane, and this film is just shot with such a remarkable level of detail. It really does feel like it's just, behind the scenes footage from the making of that film. It's so convincing. Um, and my favorite part of the movie is Godard's relationship with Gene Seberg, who's played in this by Zoe Deutsch. And, it's clear that Seberg, when she first meets Godard, she's like, why did I agree to this? This was a horrible idea. I have no idea what's going on. And then eventually they develop this kind of playfully antagonistic kind of like brother sister kind of dynamic, and just watching them together playing off each other is really really entertaining and endearing. And whether you like Godard or not, what comes through in this is just, a love of creation, a love of creativity. It makes you want to go out there and be creative. You know, so I'm still not a big Godard fan, but just as a movie about a bunch of people making a crazy movie together, this is pretty wonderful. Uh, Number 18 is The Mastermind. So this is our second and final film with Josh O'Connor in it. This is a new Kelly Reichardt movie. I've only recently been getting into Kelly Reichardt stuff. The first movie of hers I saw when it came out was First Cow. And I need a drink. This movie is similar to First Cow in some ways, in that it's like a very, very unconventional heist movie. Uh, but, this one is much more straightforward with that influence. Um, what I love about this movie is, like, okay, when you see the title The Mastermind, and you see that it's starring, a cool guy like Josh O'Connor, and, you you know that he does like art heists, you know the image you have in your head is probably a bit, just a movie about some guy who's like real smooth, who's like, in artist in what he does, who's like this mastermind, hence the title, The Thief, like a Thomas Crown Affair type of thing, you know, you where even like the cops, they want to catch him, but they have to admire kind of the elegance of his craft and shit. And that's what those movies are always like. And this is not that at all. But it wants you to go in thinking it's going to be that, and then it just really fucks with you in a really interesting way. Like, this guy who Josh O'Connor plays is an idiot, he's a terrible thief. And this art heist he plans out is like the worst heist of all time. It's literally just, I'm gonna park outside the front door and you guys run in and then grab the paintings and run out. That is his big complicated heist. And obviously it does not go well, as you wouldn't expect it to. And, it's basically this guy who has this nice, but a little boring home life. It's like he has everything he needs, but he feels a little bit unfulfilled. And so he takes this massive risk, and he has no idea what he's doing, clearly. And he just ruins everything for no reason. He brings it on himself. And even the score to the movie is like this very conventional kind of cool guy heist score, and like, if you just close your eyes and listen to the music, you'd be like, I bet there's a super cool heist going on right now. But then you're watching the screen and you're like, this is not a cool heist at all. This is bullshit, like, what are you doing? And you know maybe as you're easing into the movie, it'll be like a bit of whiplash where you're just like, for example, there is like an endless sequence in this movie. Like, when it was happening, I was like, why the fuck is this in the movie? Where, okay, so he gets the paintings, right, and then he goes to hide them in a barn. And so he tries to put the paintings up in this loft, but it's too heavy. He has both the paintings in a box, and it's too heavy to lift up there. So what we get is this agonizing, I swear, it's like 10 minutes, this scene where he tries to put the box up, he can't put the box up, so then he puts the box down, and then he opens the box, and then he takes the paintings out of the box, and then one by one he takes the paintings and climbs up a ladder and puts the paintings in the loft, and then he goes back down, he grabs the other painting, goes up the ladder, puts the painting down, goes back down the ladder, grabs the box, goes back up the ladder, puts the paintings in the box, and then hides the box. And then the friggin' ladder falls over, and he has to like hurt his ankle and mess up his pants getting down. And then when he goes home, his big concern is, oh, if my wife sees that I have dirty pants, she's gonna be like, what were you doing? How'd your pants get dirty? So he has to like stealthily put on a different pair of pants. And this is so fucking lame. Jesus Christ. But, like, once you get out of the movie and you see what it was all adding up to, you're like, oh, that was actually really clever, So it's like a movie I've appreciated more and more since I saw it. And yeah, if you want to see a movie about, a genuinely terrible criminal for a change, who the title is very sarcastic, definitely check this out. Number 17 is Superman, the new take by James Gunn. This is, I think, definitely the best Superman film since the original '78 movie with Christopher Reeve. It might just be the best. Period. I mean, it's my favorite ever. I'll say that. Um, James Gunn just really fundamentally understands the character and understands his appeal. And I was worried when James Gunn took over this property just because he's like a very kind of cynical director. Like, I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but his work is usually like very acerbic, and that wouldn't really fit the tone of Superman. But he walks that line really well. It's like the world that Superman's in can have that cynicism to it, but he can't. He has to, remain pure. He just has to be a good guy and do the kind of shit a good guy would do. And he does. And they manage to even make that compelling. Seeing him struggle a bit, seeing him struggle a little bit in his relationship with Lois, which is great. Him and David Corn Sweat, is that his freaking name? Corn Sweat? I don't know. But him and Rachel Brosnahan as Clark and Lois, they have a really interesting dynamic that's really fun to watch. Nicholas Hoult is really entertaining as Lex Luthor, and you've also, of course, got Crypto Superdog, who is easily the best part of the movie. I would appreciate just a pet Justice League kind of movie. I mean, they tried to do that a few years ago with the animated pets, and it wasn't what it should have been. James Gunn, he has a lot of empathy for animals. Weirdly, he always writes animal characters really, really well. Um, so I think he could bring something cool to it. But yeah, I mean, there are some moments in this where maybe they go a little crazy on the CGI, but it's like, what do you expect, And it's just it's a wonderful, really fun movie. The guy who plays Mr. Terrific fucking kills it too. Um, but yeah, it's a very promising start for the new DCU, and I enjoyed it very much. Number 16 is a documentary called Grand Theft Hamlet. And this is a movie. It takes place during the pandemic lockdown, and it's about these two actors, stage actors, who are currently unemployed, because they have to stay inside. And so, they miss that part of their lives. They miss, expressing themselves through the theater. So they decide to put on a production of Hamlet inside Grand Theft Auto Online. Um, and so they like hold auditions within the game, for like online players can come in and do line readings and all of this, and then they try to find the right place to stage it and all of this, and run rehearsals and all this stuff, and throw. But what starts out as this really funny joke, it becomes increasingly personal and sincere. And I think this movie captures the tone of what it felt like during the COVID pandemic, and all of the sadness and all of the anxiety and the alienation of it, better than any other movie I've seen. By this point we're a little removed from it. We've started to get a few filmic representations of that time, and I don't think any of them have come close to nailing it like this movie does. It really captures how we were all feeling back then. And it does it in a way that's very entertaining and very funny. So I recommend. All right, so number 15 is Highest to Lowest, the latest film by Spike Lee. This is a remake of High and Low, which was made a couple of times, most notably probably by Akira Kurosawa. And Spike Lee continues to be one of my favorite directors, and partially just because he's so surprising. When you go to one of his movies, you know you're going to get something that's like really bold and unique, but you don't quite know what you're going to get. And sometimes, you'll get a really great movie like Black Klansman or The Five Bloods or, Inside Man, to just name one of my favorites from previous in his filmography. Or, you might get something like, like Miracle at St. Anna or The Sweet Blood of Jesus, or his Old Boy remake, like these movies that just don't quite work and come together. So every time you go in, you don't know which Spike Lee you're going to get. And that's part of what makes it so interesting, I think. He's very like restless as a filmmaker. He doesn't, rest on past victories. He just keeps trying weird shit, and I really respect that. But I think this movie in particular really shows off how much control he has as like a filmmaker and as a craft person. Because okay, so when I started watching this movie, I got about 10 minutes in, and I was like, oh no, this is one of the bad ones, because it's like, it just felt so stilted and weird. Like, it begins with Denzel Washington's character, his son gets kidnapped, and they're trying to figure out who has him and what they want. And just, I wasn't like feeling the emotion of it. It all felt like very artificial, like they weren't acting like normal people. They were like automatons, and I was just like, why does this feel so fake? But then something really impressive happens over the course of the movie, which is that you learn that these people have built up this like artificial facade, because Denzel Washington, he plays like this incredibly successful record company executive, and so their lives have become all about presenting to the world, like, look at how successful I am, look at how wealthy I am, and it's all become like about status. It's not really about, the music and the art to him anymore. It's just, what does he get out of it, you know? And that culminates in this freaking amazing scene between him and ASAP Rocky, and it's weird that ASAP Rocky is in two of my favorite movies of the year, but what can you do? It's neat. But yeah, I mean, as the movie goes on, and more of this facade that they have begins to crumble away, and you get to see, who are the real people underneath this, this disguise, it's like the entire film changes with the characters. Like the way it's shot, the way it's written, the way it's acted changes as these characters have to kind of, drop this act they've been doing and get back to who they really are at their cores. You know, and it's just a really neat experience if you're willing to go with it. You know, I can see watching this movie and being like, oh, none of that was intentional. You're just projecting on it and stuff. But I really don't think I am. I really think it was a very deliberate, very intentional choice. And I think it really speaks to the characterization of these characters, particularly Denzel's character. And Denzel is fantastic in it. Like, what else is new? But yeah, I think, like, sneakily, it's one of Spike Lee's most interesting movies in a while, which is saying something because they're always interesting. Number 14 is Twinless. This is one of those movies I went into with like no expectations. I just heard some good things about it in the film festivals. And it's a super cool movie. It's about this guy played by Dylan O'Brien in an incredible performance. He plays both himself and his twin brother. But his twin brother is only in it a little bit because at the beginning of the movie, his twin brother dies. He gets hit by a car. And so then it's about him kind of processing this grief over his brother and learning how to live alone. And then this other guy over on the right here on the poster, who is actually the guy who wrote and I believe directed the movie, he shows up in this guy's, support group for people who have lost a sibling, especially like a twin sibling, because it's such a strong bond, and they become, good friends, and there's some ambiguity there. Like, does this guy have like a crush on Dylan O'Brien's character, or like what's exactly going on there? And the more you learn about this guy, the more you realize like how deceptive he's being, and that he has all of the stuff that he has to hide, and it I guess I would describe it as like a thriller, but like a very unconventional one. It's almost like more of a dark comedy, back when, like, Alexander Payne was like really acerbic, you know back in like the election days. um it's a very unique movie. And the woman who plays Dylan O'Brien's girlfriend, she's so great in it. She takes this part that could have been like a one-dimensional part of this, like, ditzy woman who gets in the way of this other guy, who gets between him and Dylan O'Brien's character. Um, and it could have been like a stock character, but she brings a lot of complexity to it. She makes the part really interesting and three-dimensional. And then I found out that she was the actress from The Nightingale, which is like the opposite of this movie and the opposite of this character. It's just like unrelenting grief and violence, and that absolutely blew my mind when I realized that was the same actress. If you've seen The Nightingale, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, watch it with caution. But yeah, Twinless, great movie, great performance by Dylan O'Brien. Really unique, really funny while still being really dark. I really recommend it. Number 13 is The Baltimoreans. This is the new movie by Jay Duplass, and I didn't think when I watched it this was going to be so high. This was another one where I just heard, it played at like South by Southwest, like it says up there on the poster, and I was, I just heard it was, kind of a funny, nice movie, and it is. Um, but it's also like really beautiful. Like, it kind of sneaks up on you. Like, it's a really funny movie, but it's also really heartfelt. And these two actors here are both like brilliant in the movie, and just their interplay with one another. They're obviously like falling in love over the course of the movie, but this guy, he has a girlfriend. He doesn't really know what he wants. And he's just, responding to what's happening around him, and the fact that, they have this undeniable connection. But it's like, it's such a realistic, kind of friendship, quasi something else kind of thing. Just the interplay between them is so realistic. Like, you never see like, like chemistry like this in a movie. It's rare, and they just play off each other so well. And the dialogue in it is so funny, and it gets to some very like fundamental human stuff. And it's not like a big, it's a subtle movie, but it's like so endearing. And this is the kind of movie that I could watch like, 50 more times. It made me happy. Number 12 is Hamnet, which is not a movie that made me happy. This is an incredibly sad movie. It's about Agnes, the wife of William Shakespeare. Um, it's about their child who passes away, and about the impact it has on their family and on William's art. And yeah, it's a brutally sad movie, but it's directed by Chloe Zhao, who is a fantastic director from like a visual sense. Her movies are always so beautiful, and this is no exception. It's a gorgeously shot film with great performances. Jessie Buckley totally deserved to win the Oscar for this. I was happy that she did. Um, I was kind of dreading seeing this movie because it sounds like it's gonna be like all misery. Like you're just gonna sit there and just feel bad. But that's not all it is. It has a lot of colors to it, and it has moments that are really joyous too. You know, but overall, it's just a beautiful movie, beautifully shot, beautiful score by Max Richter, and yeah, I recommend it if you don't mind being super duper sad. Number 11 is Marty Supreme. So this is the second Safdie Brothers movie of the year, sort of. I mean, they each made a movie. So Benny's movie was um, the the Smashing Machine, and Josh's movie was Marty Supreme. And this is much more of a typical kind of Safdie Brothers experience, where it moves really fast and it's stressful and it's crazy, and also our protagonist is an unlikable monster who somehow we still root for. That's really, I think that more than anything is what defines their style, is that they have these main characters who you absolutely can't get behind. Like, they do like horrendous stuff, but because they get you into their head and build empathy for them so convincingly, it's like you part of you goes along with it, and part of you wants them to be okay and to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. And that's the nature of this too. I do think this is Timothy Chalamet's best performance to date. As happy as I was with Michael B. Jordan winning the Oscar, and I was very happy. I personally, I think I would have voted for Chalamet, because yeah, I mean, he's an irredeemable prick in this movie. He's like, super egotistical, and he uses people. But there's something about him you root for, and you kind of see it at the end. As it goes on, it kind of reveals that there is like a human in there somewhere, you know. But it just takes a while for him to come out. And this movie has like the weirdest cast of the year, and it all works. I really do think, they gave the first Oscar for best casting this year, and I really do feel like this should have won because the cast is ridiculous. Like, you have freaking Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank in here. You have Tyler the Creator. You have the director Abel Ferrara as like the antagonist of the movie. You have Fran Drescher from The Nanny playing his mom. You have uh, Ken Gillette plays like this weird hillbilly man with a shotgun. It's crazy, and it all works. It all works like really well. And also, the score in here by Daniel Lopatin, I think that's how you pronounce it, One O Tricks Point Never, is just fantastic. Yeah, it's a really fun movie. It didn't hit me as hard emotionally as Uncut Gems or Good Time did, but it's still it's a great watch. And number 10 is Sinners. This is a movie that actually it went up for me over the course of the year, and I recently rewatched it and put it a bunch of slots higher. This is not the kind of movie that usually gets nominated for a ton of Oscars. It got nominated for the most Oscars of any movie ever, 16 nominations, and at its core, it's a really entertaining kind of action quasi musical with like vampires in it and shit, and the fact that the Academy would embrace a movie like that is great, but it's also obviously due to who's directing this. I mean, this is directed by Ryan Coogler, and since he made Fruitvale Station, which was a really beautiful, smaller movie, he's been doing this like grand entertainment, like the Black Panther movies, like Creed, and then this. These are like big commercial movies, but they have an artistry backing them up. You know, like it's not a coincidence that this is the guy who directed the only Marvel movie, the only superhero movie to ever be nominated for Best Picture, Black Panther. And it's that he can take this very commercial framework and like elevate it as an artist and bring something really unique to it that's uniquely his. And this movie is just such a crazy mishmash of genres and influences. And it's just, it's so unique and so skillfully done. Obviously, everybody talks about that amazing I Lied to You sequence where it kind of almost like goes through the history of music as it, like, as the camera moves around the room. Um, the antagonists in this are really effective too. I mean, they sing some real pretty songs, and then they get real scary. And but once again, this is not like the scariest horror film in the world. I don't think that's really the intention of the film. It's just doing this kind of mashup of I hate these terms, but like high art and low art and all this stuff, coming together, to do this kind of elevated, almost, it's almost like a take on From Dusk Till Dawn, where you have the first half is the build up and you don't really see what's coming, but you get like some hints, and then the second half is like insane vampire carnage, but it's so beautifully shot and scored and edited, and the cast is so great. I mean, especially Michael B. Jordan playing both brothers. And I think I said this in my Oscar video, but he makes both of them just so distinctive that you can always tell which brother is on screen at any given moment. He moves differently, talks differently. They're so individualistic as characters. And that's why he won the Oscar, because he's giving two great performances in this movie. Legitimately. But yeah, it's a great film, and I can see my appreciation for it growing even more on subsequent rewatches. But number nine is 28 Years Later, which is the new film by Danny Boyle and Alex Garland reteaming from, they made the original 28 Days Later together, then 28 Weeks Later. I know Danny Boyle didn't have any involvement with that movie. I don't think Alex Garland, maybe he did to some extent, but this is the return of that team to the franchise after a very long time. And to be honest, I was not like clamoring for a sequel to 28 Days Later. Like, I think it's a really good movie, but I didn't necessarily finish that movie and be like, I need another one. It's like I need to see more in this world. Like, I was fine with it ending where it did. And this takes the franchise in just a radically different direction, which has already been expanded upon this year by 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, which is an awesome movie. Spoilers. But yeah, I mean, this film, it just takes it in such an unexpected direction, and then even from there, it never lets you get your bearings. It just keeps showing you this bizarre, really unnerving shit, and it's just you know your protagonist is like a kid, so he's like very vulnerable. He's not like an action hero, he's just this kid who's trying to help out his mom, and you feel awful for him that he has to grow up in this like nightmare world, and then you have Ray Fiennes in here playing this weird doctor who's like trying to like establish some kind of personal bond with these monsters, these kind of zombies. I don't think they call it the infected, whatever. They're zombies. And he's trying to like bridge the gap between them and like build up some kind of understanding and figure out why they are the way they are. And he's a really fascinating character, which they go into a lot more in the Bone Temple, to great effect. And then the end of this movie is just absolutely nuts. Like, I didn't know what to think, but it's almost like an after credit scene, but they were just like, nah, let's just put it at the end of the movie, because it's bizarre and it doesn't quite fit with the rest of the movie, but as like a teaser for what's coming next, it's like really exciting. So it's like, your brain can't process it in the moment. You get out of the movie and you're like, what the fuck just happened? And then you start thinking about it, and you start thinking, well, that was neat. That kind of freaked me out, and I liked it. It's a very cool movie. It's a reminder that Danny Boyle, because he hasn't been doing his most interesting work as of late. It's a reminder of what a brilliant director he really is, and obviously Alex Garland is one of the best screenwriters out there. Number 8 is Weapons, the new movie by Zach Cregger, who recently did Barbarian. Um, and this is just, I think he compared it to Magnolia as well, and that's a really great comparison if you've seen that. It's like a horror version of Magnolia, where it's all of these separate characters and separate vignettes, and they're all trying to accomplish different things, and like all of these stories, come together in this very strange and satisfying way. Um, and this is just such an entertaining movie. This does have moments that are legitimately really, unnerving, that get under your skin. But it's also just incredibly entertaining, and funny and shocking. I mean, the cast in here is really fantastic. Everybody from Julia Garner to Josh Brolin to Alden Ehrenreich. I mean, there are lots of good actors in it. I can't name them; my brain doesn't work, but they're really good. And Amy Madigan in this is absolutely incredible. I was so relieved that she won the Oscar, because it seems like the kind of performance they don't really give Oscars for, because it's broad and crazy, and but it's iconic. It's already an iconic performance and an iconic character, and you rarely get to see that. You rarely get to walk out of a movie and be like, oh, I just witnessed an iconic character being created. It's a weird feeling, but it's true. She's fantastic, and I mean, what's interesting about the movie is they spend the first half just setting up this very intricate mystery, and then after a while, you just, it's like there's a complicated question, but there isn't a complicated answer. The answer is just like batshit insane, so I can understand, somebody who is like trying to piece together the first half, getting to the second half and being like, what the fuck is this, but I really enjoyed it, because the way it goes in the second half is so insane that it is kind of a simple answer in a way, but you won't anticipate it, because I mean, sometimes that's the way life works, that we see something mysterious and we ascribe all this meaning to it and all these details. So that has to mean something, that has to mean something, and then in the end it's just, no, it was just this thing the whole time, this very basic thing. That happens a lot with true crime, where people get, lost in the weeds and make all these connections that are ultimately pointless, and it just turns out that they did it because they got a screwed up brain. Sometimes it's that simple. Um, And I don't want to, get into specifics if you haven't seen the movie. But if you haven't seen this movie by now, like, please watch it. It's one of the most purely entertaining movies of last year, and it's really kind of like no other movie I've seen. And number seven is Bring Her Back. This is a movie from Danny and Michael Philippou, formerly YouTubers who, well, I think they still do YouTube, but they put out a horror movie a couple years ago called Talk to Her, which was really impressive. And I was like really anticipating what they were going to do next. And I think this for me, this is even better. Like, I know some people don't agree. I know some people were kind of let down to this as a follow up to Talk to Her. But I just thought it raised the stakes even more. Like what I was talking about with the ugly stepsister, but to a much greater extent. Like, there's stuff in here that just makes you wince. Because it's a lot of violence happening to a kid, and it's like some of that stuff is like really harrowing, but basically it's about these people who this brother and sister whose parents die, and they end up staying with this strange woman played by Sally Hawkins. And at first it's just like, oh, she's kind of embarrassing and cringy and a little weird. And then the more time they spend around her, they're like, oh no, she's like legitimately deranged, like there's something wrong with her. And she has a kid, and there is something really wrong with that kid, clearly. And so they're trying to figure out, what's going on, and like, what did she do to this kid? And like, what are what's she actually trying to accomplish here, with getting these kids, getting like custody of these kids, and it's, it's a crazy movie. It's a messed up movie. It's hard to watch at times, but it's like really powerful. You like I couldn't stop thinking about this movie after I saw it, and I was so incredibly impressed with Sally Hawkins's performance. I think she's really amazing in it. It might be my single favorite performance of the year, and I don't understand why she got like no awards attention for this performance, because I think it's really something else. But what can you do? That's awards. You can't take them too seriously. Number six is Friendship. This is the funniest movie I saw last year, probably, and I've rewatched this a couple times. This is the kind of movie that I could rewatch like endlessly because it's so funny and so quotable. Um, but if you've seen Tim Robinson's stuff, you know that there will be, a dark kind of component to it. He does do, dark kind of cringe humor, where it's just like, you're laughing and wincing kind of at the same time. And it's especially true in this movie because it's about Tim Robinson's character making a new friend, who's played by Paul Rudd, who's like this really cool guy who's like a weatherman and shit. And Tim Robinson, eventually Paul Rudd realizes, this guy's a weirdo and he's like potentially dangerous. Maybe I don't want to be friends with him, but it's like by then it's too late, you know, and it escalates from there. Probably my favorite scene in the movie is where Tim Robinson's character, he tries to get answers by going in the back of a cell phone store and licking a toad. Uh, I'm not going to tell you what he sees, but it's brilliant. Um, yeah, I mean, there are so many quotes in this movie. I mean, the one that always bounces around in my head is when they're at a restaurant, and Tim Robinson thinks this other family is like looking at him, and and he gets up and he screams, I'm not scared of you, I bought a van today. It's hard to explain why this movie's so special, but it's so weird and so funny and so beautifully acted. You kind of have to watch it. It kind of defies description. All right, number five is Frankenstein, the new film by Guillermo del Toro. And, if you're familiar with del Toro's work, one of his most common themes is empathizing with monsters. That's, absolutely In the Shape of Water, in Nightmare Alley, in The Devil's Backbone. Something he always returns to, that these creatures that outwardly might appear, fearsome and monstrous, have inner lives and are worthy of empathy, you know. And Frankenstein is a really natural fit for Del Toro in that way, because even going back to the 30s in the Karloff movies, most of the time he's not trying to hurt people. Now and then, somebody will try to hurt him and he'll lash out, but for the most part, he just doesn't understand. He's just kind of stumbling around blind. Like I always go back to that scene with the little girl where he's just trying to play a game with her by the water and she ends up drowning, and like he didn't mean to do it. He just doesn't understand. Um and so in this film, you know Jacob Elordi playing the monster, he's able to, do more than Karloff did in that film in terms of, actually getting like dialogue to say and stuff. And there's a progression there from when he's first, born, and is kind of that, that monster who, can't communicate from the Karloff whale movies, and then he increasingly becomes more literate and gets more of an understanding of the way the world works and becomes more kind of human. Um, and Jacob Elordi is like absolutely incredible in this movie. Like I think he should have won the Oscar for supporting actor. This is probably, my favorite depiction of the monster I've seen since those Karloff films, and I've seen lots of versions of Frankenstein. And that's a good point, too, is when this came out, it's like, does there really need to be another version of Frankenstein again right now? And I felt the same way when he came out with Pinocchio. Like, haven't there been enough Pinocchio movies? I mean, I think that year alone, there were like 3 Pinocchio movies. There was Del Toro's version, there was the version by Robert Zemeckis with Tom Hanks, and then there was that crazy version with Pauly Shore, which is just so funny. You got to look up clips of that movie if you haven't seen it. Um, but yeah, like with Pinocchio, Del Toro is able to bring something really unique to it and really elevate it and do things with the story that are surprising. One of the things that's cool about it is he knows that we all know this story, and he knows that it's been like oversaturated, and we're going into this expecting to see the same old thing, because he's able to twist that and mess with your expectations, especially when it comes to the character of Elizabeth, played by Mia Goth. I was consistently surprised by the choices he made with her character and the impact they have on the movie. And yeah, I mean, it's a genuine epic. It's like a really long movie, really expansive. Like crazy production design, and so if you're not in the mood for like a big epic, crazy movie like this, if you just want a piece of entertainment, it might not be, what you're looking for in that moment. But if you're willing to indulge in like, a long, like sweeping epic, that's gonna take over your life for a few hours, it's a really beautiful film, I think. Number four is No Other Choice, the new film by Park Chan Wook. This is the guy who gave us Old Boy, who recently gave us Decision to Leave. He's one of the best directors working right now, I think. And this movie, makes that very clear. it's based on, kind of a pulp material based on a book by Donald E. Westlake. Um, and that pulpy thing is, very much here. But it's this really cool, it's this story that's, pulpy and crazy and violent and, and very funny at times. But it's backed up by this filmmaking that's like, so deliberate and impressive and just technically proficient. I mean, not even proficient, like it's technically like exceptional. Um, that it's most movies that are this crazy and this entertaining aren't simultaneously this beautifully made. And it's a really rewarding combination. You know. Um, Once again, kind of like with Marty Supreme, but maybe to even more of an extent here, um, this main character goes to some crazy lengths and does some awful things, but you're willing to go with him. You understand the situation he's in. You understand why he feels like he has to do these things he's doing, and you don't condone it, but you understand how he got there and how somebody else could get there too. And the ending of the movie, without giving anything away, is very bleak. You don't leave this movie feeling great about this guy and his life and where he's ended up, but um, that's appropriate. It's a very funny movie, but it is a bleak movie that has a lot of really tough things to say, and it's gorgeous to look at. It's super well acted, and it's much like Decision to Leave, which also had this thing where it's like, this police procedural. And he did this with Old Boy too. He takes this kind of, pulpy material that could be, almost like something you'd see in like an exploitation movie, and he just shoots it as beautifully and stages it as beautifully as anybody possibly could. And it's his movies are so unique and so impressive, I think. Number three is One Battle After Another. And I know that, this is the number one movie of the year for a lot of people. It was close for me, Number three is close to number one. It's not number one, but it's close. And Paul Thomas Anderson is one of my absolute favorite directors. I mean, his last movie, Licorice Pizza, was my favorite movie of that year, and this certainly came close. And also, I would say There Will Be Blood might be my favorite of that year. It might be second to The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, because I'm weird. And then Punch Drunk Love, I would say, is probably my favorite movie of 2002. Magnolia is up there on my list of movies from 1999. Um, I mean, all of his movies are wonderful. Phantom Thread, Boogie Nights, like, he's a brilliant filmmaker. And there was kind of a feeling with this, like I had with The Departed, where it's just like this is a really good movie, and I'm glad he's getting all of these awards and notices for it. But like, why did it take so long? Why is this the moment when he's been doing like exceptional work for so long? You know. But the difference between this and Scorsese winning for The Departed is, The Departed is like a really solid, fun movie, but it's not like a masterpiece on like the level of Taxi Driver or Raging Bull. And I do think this is one of Paul Thomas Anderson's very best movies. I don't even know if it would make my top five, but that's because it's competing with like There Will Be Blood and The Master, and Magnolia and shit. Like it's tough competition, But um, I would say this is one of the most purely fun, purely entertaining movies he's made in a long time. It's not an artsy movie at all. He's very capable of that, but this is just, it's a great, it's a thriller, really, and it's beautifully acted. It's really funny. Sean Penn, say what you will about him as a guy, but he's incredible as the bad guy in this movie. He's just like so repulsive. It's like, just even in like the way he moves, the way he speaks, it's like this really transformative performance. And everything he does is just to make himself like more repellent. Like every time he shows up on screen, you're just like, go away. He's fantastic. And Tiana Taylor, amazing in this movie. Benicio del Toro, super likable. DiCaprio, this is one of my favorite performances of his. He's you feel for him certainly in what he's going through, but he's also really funny. Like I always come back to that scene where he's trying to call this organization he used to be a part of, to help him find his daughter, and he can't remember the code words, and he's just getting like increasingly pissed off at this guy on the phone, and it's a good time. Um, but yeah, I mean, just a beautifully shot movie. Great score by Johnny Greenwood. It's unimpeachable. It's like it's not my number one, but I understand why it's everybody's number one, and my appreciation for it might even grow in subsequent years because it happens sometimes with his movies. Like the first time I saw Phantom Thread, I was like, yeah, that was pretty good. That's just a solid. It's not one of his best movies, but it's a solid movie. And then by like the third time I watched Phantom Thread, I was like, this is incredible. So I've already seen this twice, and I loved it even more the second time. So we'll see how I feel about it in a few years. But as of now, it's a really exceptional, really funny, really exciting, really beautifully acted and written movie. Number two is Train Dreams. It is absolutely insane that this went straight to streaming because just visually, just in terms of cinematography, this is the most beautiful film of the year. The cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. It should have won the Oscar for best cinematography. I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking, but yeah, it's a very beautiful, very simple film. It's based on a novella. So the material it's based on is very short, very scant but very evocative, and the movie just builds off that in a gorgeous way. It's not like a narrative driven film. It's basically about this guy who works on the railroad, chopping down trees, and then he comes home and he has a wife and a daughter who he loves very much, but he has to keep leaving them to go out and chop down trees, and then come home, with the money and hang out with them during the winter, and then go back out there in the summer and chop down some more trees. And like this is his life. And he's so happy when he's with his family, and he doesn't mind the work exactly. He likes the camaraderie he has with people, including William H. Macy in this movie, who plays like a demolition expert, and he's really wonderful in the film. Um, but he also feels like, every time he comes back to see his daughter, she's like, another like half year older, and he feels like, I'm missing so much of her life. But that's just the reality of his situation, you know, and it's a very tragic movie. It's a very beautiful movie. It's a movie that I know that some people find the constant narration kind of off-putting. I liked it. I mean, number one, it's by Will Patton, who's a really good actor, underrated actor. And I don't know, it kind of reminded me of. It's funny because I was just talking about the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, but that's another movie where it has kind of this omnipresent kind of narration going on throughout the whole film, but it's so beautifully written, and it doesn't just explain what you're seeing on screen, it like deepens it. So I had no problem with the narration at all. And I thought the ending of this movie was really gorgeous, kind of perfect. Like there was this part at the end of the assassination of Jesse James, which spoilers, but Jesse James, gets shot in the assassination of Jesse James. I don't know if you saw that coming. That is the title of the movie. Um, Not to be snarky or nothing, but there's this part after Jesse gets shot where Robert Ford kind of just has to, process what he did and what his life is now. And a lot of the tone of this movie really reminded me of the tone of that last chapter of the assassination of Jesse James. This very kind of melancholy but beautiful, you know, piece of film. And this kind of has that tone throughout the whole movie, I think. And it's a very affecting film, with a beautiful score by Bryce Dessner, and you got to stick around during the credits for this beautiful song that Nick Cave wrote for the movie, and then kind of a callback to a song a character was singing earlier in the film afterwards. Yeah, I really do kind of just like love every frame of this. But it's still not my favorite movie of the year because my favorite movie of the year is War of the Worlds. Yes, War of the Worlds. This is a movie that I included in my October Horror Bonanza video. And I mean, this is just, in a movie that's just so dependent on the actor's face and their ability to convey emotion. It was just such a great idea to cast a guy like Ice Cube, who is so, while being charismatic, just so limited in his emotional range, and I really also do applaud the decision to have this be an Amazon Prime exclusive and to have Amazon literally save the world with their drones and their lightning fast delivery. No, just kidding, it's Rental Family. Which might still be an odd choice for some of you. I mean, I haven't seen this movie on a lot of top tens. Certainly not at number one for anybody else. It got largely ignored in the award season for some reason. But I just think this is a beautiful film in every way. From the acting, which is wonderful, to the script, which is, very complex and multifaceted. It's shot beautifully. It's scored beautifully by Rice Boy Sleeps, which has the guy from Sigur Rós in it. There were a bunch of movies last year that made me feel sad, but as far as feeling like a spectrum of emotion, feeling sad during one scene and really happy and uplifted during another scene and kind of everything in between. This is the movie that did that for me more than any other movie last year, and I think it was so surprising to me because I went in like almost kind of out of obligation. Like I just love seeing movies. So I'll see anything that I'm even vaguely interested in, and I was like, well, I like Brendan Fraser. I'm very pro Brendan Fraser comeback, and um, they used the David Byrne song I liked in the trailer. So yeah, I'll see that. But I was expecting it to be like a C plus. I was expecting it to be like a nice movie with a good performance that I kind of forget about after a few days, and it was not that at all. So it's about this actor, this American actor, who works in Japan, and basically, he can't get any roles, and he starts working with this company where he acts as a person in a client's life. Guy is, lonely or missing his friend, he can come over and play his best friend and play video games with him and shit. And most notably in this, he gets hired by the mother of this little girl who's trying to get into this like prestigious school, and this girl has like never known her father, um, and the mother thinks that knowing him would provide her with like more emotional stability and confidence. So she has Brendan Fraser pretend to be the girl's father. And I mean, I'm sure you can see just by saying that, um, it's pretty fucked up, you know? Um, but this service, it helps a lot of people too, and they show all sides of that. They don't shy away from any of it. They show all the people they've helped with this service, and they show how this can, really mess up people's lives if you're not careful. Because essentially, you're lying to people in a very elaborate way, and there are lots of times where the movie could have gone like really big and melodramatic, and it just doesn't. It stays small and quiet, but it doesn't shy away from any of kind of the hard realities of the situation. It's not just some like whimsical movie where these wonderful people enter people's lives and make all their lives better and then leave. It's a lot more than that. Like, even now, I'm struggling to explain, why I love this movie so much. I just watched it again like a couple of weeks ago, and because I was, not seeing it on any other lists, I was like, am I wrong about it? Is it my favorite movie of the year, or was I just like really feeling it that night or something? And I watched it again, and I was like, no, this is my favorite movie of the year, and it is. And there's nothing I can do about that. It's a beautiful movie, and it's a really original movie. And honestly, if I have one complaint, it's that they use this idea on a movie. Like, it's great, but I think you could take this idea, of this group of actors who insert themselves into people's lives to help them process various things and get past various things. That could be a TV show that could just run forever. You would never run out of potential episodes and plots and interesting places to take it. And I would watch it. I would watch the fuck out of that show. Like, every episode. It would be on for like, ever. What I'm trying to say is that it's very, I was just rambling on and on and on. Like, I went on for like another like 10 minutes. The point is, I love this movie very much. I think everybody should watch it. Everybody should give it a try. That's all I'm trying to say. It's a great movie. Okay, now as a special bonus, it's time for the 98th Annual Me Awards, where I am the only one voting for the awards. Starting with Best Original Screenplay. Nominees are Ryan Coogler for Sinners, Jay Duplass and Michael Strassner for The Baltimoreans, Holly Gent and Vincent Palmo for Nouvelle Vague, Hikari and Stephen Blackett for Rental Family, and Josh Safdie and Ronald Bronstein for Marty Supreme. And the winner is Rental Family, which I'm sure is shocking after that giant monologue about it I just gave. Great script. All right. Best Adapted Screenplay. Paul Thomas Anderson, One Battle After Another. Clint Bentley and Greg Kuidar for Train Dreams. Park Chan-wook, Lee Kyung-mi, Don McKellar, and Lee Jia-hai for No Other Choice. Guillermo del Toro for Frankenstein, or Will Tracy for Begonia. And the winner is Paul Thomas Anderson. Yay. Cinematography. Peter Andrews, aka Steven Soderbergh, for Presence. Michael Bauman for One Battle After Another. David Chambiel for Nouvelle Vague. Adolfo Veloso for Train Dreams. And Kim Woo-hyung for No Other Choice. The winner is Adolfo Veloso. Yeah. Best Editing. Tony Cranston for The Surfer, Andy Jurgensen for One Battle After Another, Parker Laramie for Train Dreams, Joe Murphy for Weapons, and Finn Oates for Warfare. The winner is Andy Jurgensen. Best Score. Bryce Dessner for Train Dreams, Johnny Greenwood for One Battle After Another, Kada and Vilda Tuve for The Ugly Stepsister, Daniel Lopatin for Marty Supreme, or Ludwig Göransson for Sinners. And the winner is Marty Supreme. I'm not totally sure how to pronounce his name, if it's Lopatin or Lopatin or whatever. One tricks point never. Best animal performance. We got Pippa the dog in Seurat, Indy the dog in Good Boy, Moses the dog and Marty Supreme. I tried for so long to find a picture of this dog. He's very important to the movie, but there is not a single picture of this dog on the internet. Olga the cat in Sorry Baby, and Tonic the cat in Caught Stealing. And I'm going to tell you what, this was one of the closest races, just because Tonic the cat, as far as cat performances go, is like really, really exceptional. Fantastic cat. But in the end, I had to go with Indy the dog in Good Boy. Alright, Best Supporting Actress. Zoe Deutsch for Nouvelle Vague, Aisling Franciosi for Twinless, Mia Goth for Frankenstein, Yom Hiran for No Other Choice, and Amy Madigan for Weapons. And the winner is, of course, Amy Madigan. Same as the Oscars. She deserves it. Best Supporting Actor, Jacob Elordi for Frankenstein, Akira Emoto for Rental Family, Jacoby Jupe for Hamnet, William H. Macy for Train Dreams, and Sean Penn for One Battle After Another. The winner is Jacob Elordi. Yeah. Best Actress, Jessie Buckley for Hamnet, Rose Byrne for If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, Sally Hawkins for Bring Her Back, Jennifer Lawrence for Die My Love, or Emma Stone for Begonia. The winner is Sally Hawkins. I have no idea how Sally Hawkins was ignored for the entire award season. I think I said this during the entry for this film on the list, but this was probably my single favorite performance of the year. She was insanely good. Best Actor, Timothée Chalamet for Marty Supreme, Brendan Fraser for Rental Family, Ethan Hawke for Blue Moon, Dwayne Johnson for The Smashing Machine, and Dylan O'Brien for Twinless. The winner is Chalamet. Yay. Alright, Best Director, Paul Thomas Anderson for One Battle After Another, Zach Cregger for Weapons, Ray Mendoza and Alex Garland for Warfare, Danny Philippou and Michael Philippou for Bring Her Back, and Park Chan-wook for No Other Choice. And the winner is Paul Thomas Anderson. Now he's got 3 Oscars. Makes me happy. Alright, and Best Picture. You already know what Best Picture is. They're my top 5 movies of the year. Frankenstein, No Other Choice, One Battle After Another, Rental Family, and Train Dreams. And of course, as we have already discussed, my favorite movie of the year is Rental Family. So, that is about it. Thank you for watching what is probably an incredibly long thing. I have not edited it. I don't know how long it is. It's probably like freakishly long, like I should be in jail probably. But, you know, it was a great year for movies. This year is already shaping up to be a very good year for movies, considering how early we are in the year. There's been some really fantastic stuff. And if you want to follow my list in real time and get the whole thing spoiled for you, I am going to link in the description a list, an ongoing list that I have going in Letterboxd, where you can see me build my movie list over the course of the year. I see usually, 1 or 2 new films every week, sometimes more. So, yeah, if you want to follow that and make next year's video redundant, feel free. Thanks for watching. Bye.